what I learned from my mother. In case we haven't met yet, I'm jessxgoh, and this is a really personal experience that I'm about to share with you. I feel called that this message will serve you. Just a couple of weeks ago, I had a falling out with my mother. And through that experience, I was able to accept the choices and decisions that she has made in my upbringing and in her life right now. And through this conversation, it was an opportunity to wake up another layer of my own consciousness to come into light. And this conversation is something that I always recommend to my clients who come and see me to rebuild their relationships with their mothers. And even though I did it in a different way, where I've given my mother a letter in the past, and that started to change things up. And then I took it to the next level where I focused on taking personal responsibility for my own suffering, for the triggers that was showing up every time we had a conversation or catching up. But I never really had that conversation, that the talk where you feel into the discomfort, where oh my God, this is just too much, I can't do it. It's just easier if I write a letter or say nothing at all. And at this point in my life, I was able to muster the courage to have that conversation with her over the phone. And I had all of these excuses not to have these conversation, such as we have a language barrier problem. She won't understand me. She won't see me for who I am. She won't accept where I'm coming from. She doesn't have the same level of consciousness as I do. I'm going to start blowing up and blaming her. And the list goes on and on and on. But those are just excuses. That's just the fear of my wounded inner child that is stopping me from receiving the healing that I deserve. And I thought to myself, if I showed up for my clients and navigated them into having that conversation, that phone call with their mothers, and they were able to heal their relationship with their mother and take that relationship to the next level, why can't I? Why can't I? And I realized I was ripping myself off. I wasn't allowing myself to receive this opportunity of this next level of healing with my mother. And so when I was triggered by her over the phone recently, I felt this heaviness of rage, of anxiety and grief showing up for me. It was uncontrollable. I could not contain it. And I'm someone who can compose herself. I immediately regressed back to the way I was behaving towards my mum when I was in high school 20 years ago. I was abusive I was swearing, I was yelling, I was threatening her. That's exactly how I communicated to her just a couple of weeks ago, through text messages, non-stop. The pain was unbearable. It just got too much. I couldn't handle the suffering, the reminder of my past. And I dumped it through a series of text messages the whole day and night onto her, and she didn't reply back. And I don't blame her. If that was me and I was mum of Jess, I'd be freaked out. I'd be like, is she okay? Had she had something to drink? Has she smoked something? And I sent an apology, and then I abused her again. And the next day, my mum finally replied back, and she said that, I'm sorry, I love you, don't think too much, take care. And I felt the love in her message, but at the same time I felt her fear, that she wanted to avoid that conversation too. She was simply reflecting back those aspects of myself. I decided to construct the conversation before I called her, so I don't get lost in my own chaos. And so I took action on that. I called her. I asked her, this is going to be a 30-minute conversation. I have a few questions to ask you. Are you free to talk? And she procrastinated, and I had to take direction in navigating this. And we both committed to a call. So we had the conversation, the talk. I asked her questions. She answered all of my questions. There was times where she hanged up on me, a few times. There was times that she lied to me because she didn't want to continue. And I can understand that she probably felt interrogated and triggered at the same time. I pushed through my own resistance and see beyond the gaslighting and the lies and the fears. And I realized that I need to push through and keep showing up by calling her until we have completed that conversation. And we did. And I tell you what, it wasn't easy. It wasn't easy. I apologized in the beginning of the call, and I had to Google Translate that for her verbally through my laptop while I was on the phone to her, because I wanted her to know how I really feel. I really wanted her to know my insights, my thoughts, my experiences. And I Google Translate. Google said, I'm sorry for being abusive towards you. And I started to cry. And she started to cry. And that was the first time she has ever heard me cry. And that was the first time I've ever heard her cry from her heart and not the crocodile tears. The healing took place immediately. As I shifted, she shifted. Throughout the conversation, I started to learn more about her upbringing, her trauma, her suffering, her decisions that she made in life. Because we were brought up differently. We were brought up in completely different cultures and countries. We speak completely different languages. We were brought up in a different society. a different era, a different generation. And throughout that conversation, there were times that we were both crying. There were times where we were both playing the victim. There were times where we were both blaming. There were times where I was blowing up. I just could not contain the anger and started yelling and abusing. And then there was times where I just observe. And you know what? All of those versions of me that came into that conversation are so welcomed. I have the right to ask those questions, and I have the right to express all those versions of me. It doesn't mean I have a personality disorder. What it showed for me was that there are different aspects of me that needs to be healed, that needed closure, that needed clarity in how we can both move on and rebuild and restore trust in this relationship as mother and daughter. And in the end, I realized, oh my God, there were so many questions that I realized that was so petty because it was coming from my own insecurity. And my mom answered those questions in ways that woke up my own consciousness. How silly those questions were, or how she was being really mature in the way she addressed those questions with facts, not lies. And I started to realize there was so many lies that I was telling myself, that I was gaslighting myself from the truth of who my mum really is. And I just wanted to take a moment to share with you just 5 lessons that has blew me away from that conversation. The first lesson: my mum gave me the life that she wanted. She thought that when I have an education in school, tutoring classes, and go to uni to get a high-paying job, that things would pan out for me. She did her best to love me, where her mother fell short on. Where her mother didn't provide her the education that she wanted. My mum only completed primary school. She never made it to high school. She was the eldest of 13 kids. She had to look after her siblings. She had to cook and clean at home. She didn't have a childhood. She had to take on responsibility and grow up fast. She doesn't know what it's like to experience fun, love, acceptance, and play in her upbringing, because her mother was highly critical of her and emotionally abusive, where she didn't have a mother-daughter relationship where there was an emotional, healthy bonding. So my mum felt neglected, and I can start to see why she made the choices that she made in her life. Lesson number 2. What I wanted in my upbringing was not what she missed out on. It was what was in my heart that I wanted from her. I didn't want to go to uni. I didn't give a shit about my own education. I never really resonated with the learnings of attending to all these tutoring classes. It was just so academic and intellectual for me. It didn't resonate me right here. That was not my life's purpose. All I wanted was attention, creativity, praise, acceptance, love, play, honesty, connection, and communication. That's all I ever wanted to receive and experience in my upbringing and in my relationship with my mother. So she given me all of the things that she missed out on, that she felt like she wanted or needed, and gave that to me. And she gave so much of that to me that I was so turned off by it because it was forced upon me. And this is so common in cultural conditioning, particularly in the Middle Eastern and Asian cultures. Lesson number 3. My mum and I had completely different upbringings. She was brought up in the 50s. I was brought up in the 80s. Those were completely different eras, different levels of society. She was born and raised in Malaysia, in a Muslim country, with corrupted political governments. But there was also so much warmth in the community of Malaysia and the exotic flavors and the warmness of the smiles of the people there from diverse cultures of Asia. I was born and raised in Australia. I had a conflicted perspective of my own identity. Was I Asian or was I Australian? I was so confused. I even became racist towards my own kind because I thought that I was born here, I spoke the language, I didn't have an Asian accent. I thought I was Australian, but it was so conflicting because every time I look at myself in the mirror, I see an Asian woman, someone who's exotic, but I could not connect with her. I felt like I was living in 2 different worlds in one country. Languages. My mum could speak Mandarin, Cantonese, Hokkien, Teochew, and some English. I never went to Chinese school. I didn't know how to experience these languages in a way that I could speak them so fluently because my environment was just English. I felt so ripped off that I missed out on that. Education. I never went to uni. I'm just like my mum, even though she only completed primary school. I got my way to tertiary education, which is getting a diploma, different diplomas, making it through high school and primary school. But education wasn't my highest value. However, I do invest in my education when it comes to my own healing journey and the business that I'm in, because that is in alignment with my soul's consciousness. Women's rights. Mum didn't know how to ask for help. She didn't know how to speak up. She was brought up in a very backward way of tradition. She had to learn to be compliant and obedient and submissive. I was shown so differently being brought up in the Australian culture. But the conditioning of the Asian culture was so strong that it was hard for me to get curious or to ask questions or to ask for help because I didn't have a role model in my family dynamic to show that it was okay to express myself. In fact, I had my mother and dad who taught me to suppress myself. It wasn't okay to be authentic. It wasn't safe to be vulnerable. It wasn't okay to express my feelings or to be opinionated. Because every time I did that, I would get beaten up, criticized, or shut down. But I have a stronger sense of women's rights than my mother. And also our dating experiences are completely different. My mum's first and only dating experience was with my dad. And for me, I've experienced and dated multiple men. And not all of them has been a success, but I learned from that. And this is why it was hard for her to control me and for me to be obedient as a kid because of these conflicting identities, upbringings, and cultural experiences. But one thing is for sure is that we're both rebellious in our own way. In the end, we just wanted love and to be loved, to accept and to be accepted, and we both value freedom. I say this because that's one of her reasons why she came to Australia. She married my dad because she wanted to escape her family dynamic. She wanted to escape the corruption of the government of Malaysia. She wanted to experience freedom. But the thing is, you cannot experience freedom if you are not embracing your sovereignty, your personal power. You can never run away from your problems because the problems are inside of you until you face them. And I felt like it's the first time that we both face our inner demons, our problems together in our conversation. And that's freedom. Lesson number 4, me and my mum are a team. We made our relationship work because we choose to love one another in order for us to heal. It's not about being right or wrong. The decisions and choices she made or not was right or wrong. It was not about that. That's what my ego wanted to see. It's how we can see things from the other person's perspective, with compassion in our hearts. That's how we can accept our indifferences. That shapes our identity, the choices and behaviors we make in life. Each person arrived where they are now because of their past experiences of trauma in their upbringing. And that was the key message that I left with at the end of the conversation. That it is not in my place to judge where she's at in her life now and the choices or the lack of choices that she made. It's not about that. It's about having the audacity to be empathetic enough to hear her side of the story. Whether she's lying to me or not doesn't matter. I gave her permission to share her side of the story because I needed to hear it from a different perspective, to see it from a place of the observer and not one-sided as a victim. I needed to understand why she made those choices. And that was because of her journey. Every soul that is reincarnated in this lifetime has a choice and the will to choose a higher timeline or not. It's dependent if they've been contracted to wake up in this lifetime or not. And that is okay, because this is part of the human experience. So I learned to accept where my mum is at, because that's her journey, not mine. I've made different choices and decisions in my life because I choose to experience a higher level of consciousness because of what my soul has called me to do. That my mission is completely different to my mum's mission. And the last and fifth lesson that I've learned from this conversation with my mother is that me and my mum are crazy in our own ways. I've realized there was a lot of distortions and illusions and fears that I was holding on to, that I'm like, whoa, this is a true wake-up call when I started to hear the facts from my mother and started to hear her side of the story. I can see how fear created unnecessary insecurities in me and distortions that I was holding on to, which my mum's words cut through. I realized how petty some of my insecurities, questions, and frustrations were for her. I can see how her trust issues played up whenever I threatened her or someone else threatens her, because she needs that sense of security that she didn't experience in her life. She worked hard to feel security. That's why she moved to Australia. That's why she married. That's why she had kids. She wanted that security. The more I raise my consciousness and let go of my traumatic experiences, the more I can see from multiple perspectives, from a bird's eye view, looking down at the different perspectives, and select which perspective that my soul is calling me to select, to choose in this lifetime to learn from this path. This is how we heal collective karma, family lineage, future generations to come, and ancestral trauma. This is how we can heal the earth. These insights came to me the evening after the call ended. I had to write them down. My soul was telling me that I needed to, because there's a purpose in it, and it's for me to share that experience with you. Your journey or relationship with your mother, to heal that maternal lineage that they weren't able to heal, because you are watching this video right now because you feel called to be the one to take initiative and start healing this maternal lineage. If you are ready to heal your relationship with your mother and restore trust, to take it to the next level, I invite you to come and alchemize this pain of maternal lineage with me through my online immersion called Relationship Recovery. You're going to overcome emotional overwhelm and rediscover yourself with unconditional love for the different versions of you. If you feel the pull to experience this level of alchemy, click on the link below and you can access this incredible journey to your soul. And if you feel you got something out of this video or my 5 insights, please subscribe to my YouTube channel. Give it a like. Share it with your loved ones who need to hear this information right now. And may this video serve you. Remember to choose trust and surrender to love.